We are joined by a very special guest right now, our client, a whistleblower, someone you've gotten to know well, watching this broadcast, watching the news. That is FBI agent, a special agent, Garret O'Boyle. And Agent O'Boyle, thank you for joining us today on the show.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me, and thank you for what you're doing on my behalf and representing me. It's very surreal for me.
We are so proud to represent you, the ACLJ, the entire team, and also all of our supporters and our donors that make our work possible. When we announced this earlier last week, the excitement around the fact that we were stepping into this fight alongside the good people inside the law enforcement agencies in Washington, D.C., which they've been so concerned about the weaponization of these agencies. And I think to see the good people stepping up. But unfortunately, I want to start with this, and then I want to get into your bio too as well because it's so impressive. But one of the most chilling things you said in your testimony was when you were asked about whether or not if someone else at the FBI had information they felt like they should blow the whistle or go to Congress and try to receive those whistleblower protections. You told them to pray about it really hard, spend a lot of time in prayer, but ultimately acknowledge that the FBI will crush you if you come out with this information. Explain to people what it means to be crushed by the FBI.
You know, there's so much that goes into that, and it's everything. You know, the FBI was the top of the mountain for me all along the hiring process. I never thought I would make it all the way through, and I did. And then to have that dream job and to have it taken from me because I was trying to do the right thing. But more than that, it's really what was done to my family. They're really the casualties of war in this one. I don't really care. I said it. I touched on it in my testimony. I don't really care what the FBI does to me because, I'll stand behind my actions and everything I've done to try to uphold my oath. But what they're doing in retaliation to my family is really what has been the most difficult. And they literally take everything. In my case, they've made us homeless. We were living in an RV for weeks. And I will never be convinced that wasn't part of the retaliation. They knew that I was in the middle of that transfer. They let me transfer anyways, which is a violation of FBI policy itself. And then they knew that I had just had a baby. They knew we had just sold our house. They knew we hadn't closed on our house in Virginia yet. They had all of our belongings in storage, and they do it anyways. They take your clearance and effectively terminating you essentially, and then they take your pay because you don't have a clearance. And so they literally strip everything from you. You know, it's in a lot of ways, it's a modern day death sentence to put somebody into a position like that.
I think it's really interesting because this is the moment, I think, when we revealed this, we played part of your testimony on, I think this was Monday or Tuesday, when we first kind of started talking about the process. And I know people have heard about it. They've heard about the whistleblower situation. They've heard about some of the issues within the FBI. But when they hear from you specifically, and Jordan, when they hear these family, dire situations that we're putting our essentially heroes in, it is really alarming. And I think it clicked with a lot of people. Yeah. And we saw that reaction. We saw people really go, wow, I've kind of heard about it, but to hear about it firsthand was a lot different.
Agent O'Boyle, I mean, it's again, it's fair to call you easily an American hero. I just want to remind people, before serving as an FBI special agent, you served in the 101st Airborne and fought in both Iraq and Afghanistan in Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom. A hero alone, just by taking those action, received the Combat Infantry badge that is awarded to those who engage in ground combat with our nation's enemies. And then after serving in the Army and fighting in those two wars for the United States of America, you joined the police. But you not only joined the police force, I want to just talk about this because I think it speaks to your character. You've got a family, you're joining the police force, but at the same time, you decide to go back and finish your bachelor's degree, finish your college degree, so that you could apply for that, as you called it, dream job at the FBI.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. And, when I got back from Afghanistan, I knew that I wasn't going to re-enlist again. And I literally thought that the hardest time of my life was over. I mean, that was foolish and ignorant looking back in hindsight, because what I'm going through now, I know I'm not getting shot at anymore, but it's been more difficult in a lot of ways. And yeah, then I became a police officer. That was a goal of mine before I even joined the Army. That's what I thought I wanted to do. And then while I was doing that, I decided to try to go back and finish my degree. So I was working third shift, and I was going to night school at Marquette University. And I ended up graduating cum laude from there. And once I was done with that, it was probably a month and a half, 2 months after I graduated that I put in my application packet for the FBI. And 11 months later, I was on my way to Quantico.
During your 4 years as a special agent, Garret O'Boyle, again, we are representing FBI Special Agent O'Boyle, and the retaliation by these government agencies. As he said, they will crush you. So we are going to make sure that these whistleblowers who are doing the right thing are protected, that their rights are restored, that they are represented vigorously in whether it's the administrative courts or the federal courts. At the ACLJ, working alongside a team of expert attorneys in this matter. We've got attorneys on the phone as early as today with the Department of Justice and assistant U.S. attorneys there. You go on, then you serve, you get this dream job at the FBI as a special agent. Over those 4 years, you received the highest annual review an employee can receive. You were selected to a special FBI SWAT team for a new unit the FBI created. But then you felt like you started to see things that were going wrong inside the FBI. Tell people about kind of what was the impetus to say, you know what, I've got to speak out. What were you seeing?
So there was a number of things that I saw, and, like, it's weird because there's a dichotomy there, because I really liked my job as an FBI agent. And I think just based on my short time there and my accommodations and the things I was accomplishing and doing and making a SWAT team and making a new unit in Virginia and getting selected for those things, that's one area of that career. And then the other is seeing things that are wrong, and it started with the EDU officials threat tag. So in most mainstream media outlets, they call it like a school board threat tag. And a different whistleblower, I think actually there were multiple whistleblowers who brought that forward. That's when I first learned of that. And then that's one of the things that I ended up disclosing to Congress further. Congressman Jim Jordan touched on it at my testimony. And based on what he said, he thinks that is the reason they retaliated against me so hard. But there were a couple other things that I whistleblew as well once I was in touch with Congress, because it was, it wasn't daily, but every now and then there was an email we would get, or an order we would get, or a new threat tag. Like there was another one, threats to SCOTUS 2022. This was in light of the Dobbs decision that reversed Roe v. Wade that came out. And in the guidance for that threat tag, it essentially flipped who we should be looking at and investigating. Because if there's a threat to a Supreme Court justice, that's a violation of federal law. Yeah, the FBI should be looking into that and investigating that. But in the guidance, it basically said to start looking into pro-life adherence. And then on top of that, like a day or two after I learned of that threat tag, I was tasked from headquarters to query one of my confidential human sources who was a pro-life person, and asked them all sorts of questions about the Dobbs decision, and if there are people in the pro-life movement who are mobilizing to be violent. And as this is happening, I'm thinking, this is way out of bounds here. The people who are pro-life, they're not going to be trying to attack anyone, certainly not a Supreme Court justice, because all the people who were picketing and protesting and rioting outside of Supreme Court justices' homes weren't people who were pro-life. So at that point, I was like, okay, this is an abuse of authority. This is a misuse of power. And so I brought that to Congress too. And so, yeah, there are things like that where certainly the FBI was out of bounds, and then at the same time trying to carry on with my career and do the best job I can. So it was an interesting path, and then it abruptly ended last September. So
the top three issues that spurred the feeling that you needed to blow the whistle, to tell Congress about wrongdoing you were seeing in the FBI. You didn't want to give up your position in the FBI. You didn't think it was beyond repair, but that there were some issues that needed to be addressed. You brought up the school boards, the parents at the school board meetings. I wanted to start with that one. That was so shocking to people. I remember talking about on this broadcast and going on other, cable news broadcasts, when they learned that just showing up at a school board meeting and voicing your concerns, whether it was the policies during COVID or the curriculum being taught to a student. I mean, that's kind of like what we encourage constantly at the ACLJ. Is we always tell people, it all starts at your city council and your school board, and you got to speak out, you got to run for those positions. Then the American people did just that, exercising their First Amendment rights, and they got an FBI threat tag against them.
Right. It's shocking stuff. And that, I first learned of it when I think it was Congressman Jordan's office who are the ones who released it to the media after it was brought to them. And when I saw that, I was stunned. And I was like, this is not the FBI that I joined. This is not a law enforcement agency that is upholding a constitutional oath that I'm aware of, because that's not what would be happening in a free society that we're supposed to be living in. And it's interesting, after that threat tag came out, my own supervisor himself, he came to my squad because I worked on the JTTF, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, and I was the domestic terrorism agent. That's what I was primarily assigned to. And he came to my whole squad after this was leaked after it was released to the media. And he said, we are not going to be surveilling or investigating parents who are attending school board meetings on this squad. And I'm grateful he took that stance, but I really would like to know if pressure started coming from above, if he would have stuck by it, because there were other things that happened, like a lot of the COVID policies that were coming down in the executive branch. He basically rolled over on those. So I wonder if he would have simply rolled over if he was told contrary to what he had, instructed my squad to do. But yeah, and then a friend of mine who I testified with, Steve Friend, he's become a close friend and confidant. But we know from his testimony that he was sitting in a parking lot at a school taking down license plates and watching parents and whatnot. And then, a couple weeks ago, Director Ray, he probably perjured himself when he said that wasn't happening. So it's.
Yeah, you've literally got these. You all are testifying under oath, under penalty of perjury, to Congress, and yet you have these top-level Washington, D.C., we call them seventh floor Washington, D.C. FBI, come out before Congress and just brazenly say that's just not true. They said that about the threat tag on the Catholic churches, too, being radicalized. And then we found out that it wasn't just at a Richmond field office, that the memo originated there, that they had actually put an informant in one of the churches, but that the memo, they said, it was just in Richmond and we shut it down. And then we found out later from testimony that memo went far and wide throughout FBI field offices across the country. You also talked about, because I think it's very important for people to know, you're on the Joint Terrorism Task Force on domestic terrorism, so threats from within. And after the Dobbs decision, when the groups that were angry were really the supporters of abortion rights, that was the pro-life community was celebrating, and yet they tell you, you need to go focus in on pro-life advocates. Let's target them. We think they're going to be responsible for violence. And then we saw the threats on the Supreme Court. Those threats, we had someone make it 2 blocks away from Justice Kavanaugh's home, to the point where he had to have U.S. Marshals and agents surrounding his house, and their security has been increased to levels they've never had to do with the Supreme Court. So it's like they were not even dealing in reality.
Absolutely. So, that is another aspect that really stood out to me with that threats to SCOTUS threat tag, because, most FBI offices have the news running like all day. So, in Wichita, in Fairbanks, Alaska, wherever you are as an FBI agent, you're seeing the news of the day. And at that time, you're seeing that it's pro-choice advocates who are protesting and making threats. And you mentioned Justice Kavanaugh. In that case, it certainly seemed like that guy was going to try to harm him or kill him. That based on what was released in the media. So when you get that threat tag, and at first blush, it's like, okay, yeah, they're saying we got to make sure that any threats to the Supreme Court are handled appropriately, and rightfully so. But then when you add guidance in there that, okay, let's take a look at pro-life advocates as well. It just is very bizarre. It's a counter reality to what was happening at that time, and it shouldn't have been done, because in that way, it's basically the intelligence gathering portion of the FBI, which I think is a huge problem. And it's especially troubling when they have such a massive intel capability combined with that law enforcement power. Because in this case, it was like, oh, they're just fishing to gather intel on people, and they're not even looking at the correct group that we should be looking at, or at least they're not focusing on them entirely, which that's what we should have been doing.
You know, we've got a couple minutes left. And my final question to you, Agent O'Boyle, we're so honored to represent you at the ACLJ. I know our members, too. They are so excited that we're going to be standing beside you in this tough situation you should never be in. But I wanted to go back to one thing they ask constantly of us, and, you know, we've dealt with a lot of these issues, is are these agencies beyond repair? But it seems like when there's individuals like you and these other whistleblowers that have come out from the FBI, that there are a lot of good people inside the FBI who are just scared to speak out, and that if we can make sure they're protected, that we can right the wrongs that we see inside the agency, and the FBI could get back on track. I mean, I think that's the hope that the American people want to feel.
I agree. I think that is the hope. That's the hope that I have. Granted, the more I talk to former colleagues and people in the FBI, the more it seems that they are just so afraid. You know, I even told them that ACLJ is taking me on as a client. And I said, the time is now. You guys can all start coming forward. We have the legal capability. We have the connections to Congress. Like, everybody needs to be whistleblowing about the things they're seeing, because I'm sure what me and others have done, we're just scratching the surface.
Agent O'Boyle, again, and that call you said right there, what you said right there too, the ACLJ, we've got the resources, we have the support, we've got the attorneys, we've got the experts to stand by you in this fight, to stand by other whistleblowers in this fight. And I think you said it right. This is the time to speak out, because big organizations are ready to stand with you. Thank you for joining us today. We're proud to represent you. I'm sure we'll have you back on the broadcast soon. Join the ACLJ in the fight to keep America free.